The Fighting Nerds were supposed to take over the UFC in 2025, but at UFC Paris, the takeover came to a screeching halt. Both Caio Borralho and Mauricio Ruffy lost in the main event and co-main event of UFC Paris. So what does this mean for what I just called last week MMA's next dynasty? MMA's next super gym. Stick around to hear my thoughts on UFC Paris. I'm Wyatt, and this is Fight Society. Now, heading into UFC Paris, the hype for the Fighting Nerds was at an all-time high. You got Gene Silva main eventing Noche UFC next week. You got Borralho and Ruffy, the two headliners for UFC Paris, and we just got Carlos Prates announced against Leon Edwards for Madison Square Garden in November. I just made a video last week about how the Fighting Nerds are taking over the UFC, and here we have two losses in the same night, back-to-back fights. Heading into UFC Paris, the stakes were absolutely massive for the Fighting Nerds brand. Could they get a #1 contender out of Caio Borralho? Could they get a top 10, top 12 guy out of Mauricio Ruffy by beating Benoit Saint Denis? Could they get 4 belts in 2026? All of those were questions we had to ask, but they lost both of their fights last night at UFC Paris, and we're going to get into it, all right? Now, first, we're going to talk about Nassourdine Imavov and, of course, Fighting Nerds representative Caio Borralho, who took the loss last night. One thing that I want to say off rip is that this fight was so much closer than the score made it seem, because I think all 3 judges, or 2 out of 3 judges, had it 50-45 for Nassourdine Imavov, whereas I scored the fight 3-2, as you can see right here. Total strikes, 89-89. Takedowns, 0-0. Significant strikes, you have a little bit more in favor, about 25% more in favor of Nassourdine Imavov. But when you go through these rounds, round 1 to Imavov, that makes sense. 10-6 on the significant strikes, no takedowns. Okay, that makes sense. Round 2, 13-7. On significant strikes, no takedowns, no knockdowns. That makes sense. That's Imavov. Round 3, though, we have 21-14 on total strikes, 17-13 on significant strikes. I know that it's not just a numbers game, but I had Caio Borralho winning the 3rd. And then in the 4th, of course, a little bit more of a pulling ahead for Nassourdine Imavov to go into the 5th round up 3-1. And then here, slight edges in both of significant strikes and total strikes for Caio Borralho, which is why I scored this fight 3-2. Caio Borralho was just chewing up that outside leg, slowing down Nassourdine Imavov's footwork. Really, the only thing that I think played into Caio Borralho's mind that really affected the outcome of this fight was Nassourdine's KO of Israel Adesanya in the fight prior to this, because Israel Adesanya was a dominant champion in a time where these guys were starting out as professional fighters trying to get to the UFC or early on in their UFC career. And Nassourdine Imavov KO'd him on the feet. And I think that Caio Borralho was constantly worried about taking that big shot. And he's somebody that gets hit a lot, but he was on the back foot a ton in the rounds that he lost. And the rounds that he won, it seemed like he just said, kind of, fuck it, I got to go for this and start mounting some offense, which he did. But Caio Borralho, as you can see right here by the stats, really struggled with getting the fight to the ground, which he does like to do. He attempts about a takedown, or a little bit over 1 takedown a round. So here he is, 0 for 2 here, never went back to it, lost the round. 0 for 1, never went back to it, lost the round. 0 for 1, never went back to it, but still won the round, in my opinion. 0 for 1, lost the round, didn't go back to it, and no takedowns in the 5th. By then, Nassourdine Imavov is starting to gas out, and he's up 3 rounds, pulling away. In France, they give it 50-45, I guess. That sounds pretty corrupt to me. Pretty biased viewing of the fight from the French judges, but hey, still, Imavov won, so I guess it's kind of a moot point to say that 2 of the rounds that were scored for him should have gone to Borralho, because he did win the fight fair and square, and it didn't necessarily change the outcome of the fight. Borralho wasn't able to get a finish. He had a hard time with the range. Imavov was able to close the distance. He was on the front foot for a lot of the fight. Imavov, what I really do like about Imavov, because we've seen this a few times now, where this fight, Caio Borralho tried to turn up the heat to bring something back at him. Israel Adesanya was mounting offense against him literally right before the KO. And of course, the Roman Dolidze fight, which got out of hand and got really messy with Chris Curtis yelling over the cage at him, the downed kick, all that. Nassourdine Imavov stays composed, but one thing I fucking hate about the way he fights, he cheats a lot. Eye pokes, he advances with his fingers out, eye pokes, low blows. I know Caio had a foul that I think that he got called for as well for a timeout. But Nassourdine Imavov cheats like a motherfucker, dude. And while I'm complaining about it now, I'm absolutely going to support it if it means beating Khamzat Chimaev in a championship fight. So, yeah, Imavov won. Yeah, he's very composed. Yes, he's on the front foot. Yes, he's very, very skilled. But how much do those fouls that didn't get a point deducted, how much do those fouls play into how this fight went? Could Caio Borralho have gotten a win here if things were a little bit more even? I know nothing's fair. It's fighting. Things happen. But if you had judges in Vegas and potentially a ref that's not terrible that would have stepped in and taken a point, then maybe Caio Borralho wins this fight or gets a draw out of it. So I don't think that Caio Borralho has some massive restructuring of his mindset or game plan. He just got slightly beat by a really good fighter who was cheating in the meantime and had the refs against him. I'm not just coping because I like the fighting nerds, but Caio Borralho looked better than losing in this position one. Ruffy have a lot more negative things to say, but Caio Borralho just barely lost exchanges, just barely was on the back foot too much. There's chances where he could have won the fight if he would have gotten off of his back foot, pushed forward, and of course, if, you know, maybe a point got deducted for cheating, but he just needs to be more aggressive on the feet. I think he needs to work on his takedowns because he does need them, and he is a good grappler. He does have good top control once he gets them, but he does need to work those takedowns because if he could have gotten Imavov down, and even just one of those rounds, he might have been able to steal that round. Maybe it's a different fight on the scorecards. So, Caio Borralho, hype diminished, but not hype train derailed. Quick break. If you're loving this video and you want more from Fight Society, click that join button down below to become a channel member today, where you'll get access to members only live streams, behind the scenes vlogs, and all the unfiltered stuff that we don't post to the main channel. Back to the video. Whereas in the co-main event, we had Mauricio Ruffy. Frankly, I hate to say it, Mauricio Ruffy failed a massive opportunity. You see here in round one, 19-1 on total strikes, 2 takedowns, 6 significant strikes to 1. A lot of top control, a lot of control time for Benoit Saint Denis. And then in round 2, 18-5, takedowns, sub attempts, significant strikes. Ruffy basically never got started. And there's a lot of people saying that Mauricio Ruffy is a terrible grappler. He actually did scramble in some spots that I thought was impressive given just how one-sided that fight was. But you just can't expect people to crumble at repeated backhands. Like, he literally just throws that backhand over and over again, mixes in some wild spinning shit. When you step up from Bobby Green, King Green, who's 40 years old, been knocked out a million times, to a guy like Benoit Saint Denis, who's been in there with Dustin Poirier. I know he lost, and I know he got knocked out. He's been in there with a top 5 lightweight of all time, Dustin Poirier. That's the type of, you know, dog mentality. Like, Benoit Saint Denis, it doesn't always look good. It's not always the most entertaining. It's not always the Matt Frevola head kick KO. But Mauricio Ruffy, for fuck's sake, man, Benoit Saint Denis is plodding in, chin up. All he does is throw those kicks to the body and shoot double legs, and you get hurt to the rib, whatever it was, broken rib, body, liver shot, whatever. You get bothered by the first strike that gets thrown to your body, and then you allow Benoit Saint Denis to close the distance with almost no resistance, push you to the fence, take you down, control you for the entire round, eventually submit you in round 2. The fight IQ and grappling needs some work from Mauricio Ruffy. He's incredibly talented. He's so incredibly talented, but he got overwhelmed. His fight IQ is low. He got overwhelmed and he got submitted. And this is just a step up where you go back to the drawing board and you go, wow, that was Benoit Saint Denis. Imagine what Topuria would do to me. Imagine what somebody with some actual fight IQ and skill, what would Makhachev do? You know what I'm saying? Benoit Saint Denis is nowhere near those guys, and he had his way with you. So this is where Mauricio Ruffy, you can't just rely on one big shot. You got to round out the game a little bit more. And Benoit Saint Denis, I don't mean to completely discredit his performance because Ruffy kind of didn't show up. He's the person that made Ruffy look like he didn't show up. He's the person that absolutely dominated, who people were crowning as the guy to take down Topuria already. So I know we're never going to hear the end of this from Lucas Tracy. He's a marauder. he's this, he's that. Bring Poirier out of retirement for a rematch. But Ruffy didn't show up. He's got some things to work on. He might need to have his push slowed. We might need to look at a unranked guy for Mauricio Ruffy. We may need to look at like a Michael Johnson matchup. We might need to look at a Drew Dober matchup like Gene Silva fought him. We might need to look at a Daniel Zellhuber or Ignacio Bahamondes, like somebody that is a pain in the ass, but not ranked. He just isn't there yet. I hate to say it. He's so talented and he's electric on the feet when he can land. But when you start getting to the top 10, top 15, top 5, people make fewer and fewer mistakes. It's not going to be like the fight at MSG where James Lontop just waltzes in heavy footed and you can hit those like no look left hooks that he throws. And, you know, it's not 40-year-old Bobby Green who is just going to get pressured and box off the back foot so you can take his head off. There's just levels to this, especially at 155, 145, 135, 170, those middling divisions, not the lightest and not the heaviest, where the talent is so high and the divisions are so deep. You just got to be more well-rounded than Ruffy showed. He just didn't show up. And he's got to add more to his game. And I just said last week that the fighting nerds are taking over the UFC. Obviously, there is a little bit of a timeout in that, a little bit of a slowing of the roll. Caio Borralho lost to the #1 contender, and he gave him a good fight. It just goes that way sometimes. He could have fixed some things. He could have done some things better, but he doesn't have as much to fix as Mauricio Ruffy. And, of course, there is 2 more massive slots for the fighting nerds this year. We have Gene Silva coming up just this next weekend, this next event at Noche UFC against Diego Lopez. And then we have Leon Edwards and Carlos Prates. That's Carlos Prates' big spot at Madison Square Garden. Silva and Prates can still save the fighting nerds hype train, bounce back. Prates already bounced back from the loss to Ian Gary in highlight reel fashion. And look, this is just the name of the game. Elite gyms have a lot of fighters. The more you fight, the more likely you are to lose, especially the more often you fight against top-level guys. It's not the fighting nerds are overhyped. It's not fighting nerds are washed. It's not Coach Pablo sucks. It's not any of those things. It's not that Ruffy sucks. You just have to reassess at this certain point. They have 2 more big matchups this year. Andy Caro Brito is fighting on Contender Series later this month. There is massive opportunity for the fighting nerds to still have belts in 2026. I still think that's a possibility. And I'm not too down about it, but there are things to be fixed, especially for Mauricio Ruffy. This is just elite fighters from an elite gym facing setbacks. They got to go back. And this is where good teams show how good they are. They rebuild, they come back stronger, they fill holes, they make adjustments, they change the game plan. That's what I think the fighting nerds are going to do. The fighting nerds went from the hottest story in MMA, the hottest gym in MMA, to facing some serious doubt after UFC Paris. Now, was this just a bad night or was this a fraud check and a hype train being derailed? Let me know what you think about the fighting nerds after their 2 losses at UFC Paris last night. I'm Wyatt. This is Fight Society. Do you want more from Fight Society? Like and subscribe below this video and click the join button to become a channel member today to get access to behind the scenes vlogs and members only live streams.